All right. Hi. This is the tooling group, Node.js tooling group meeting on July 10th, 2020. Yeah. So, hi everybody. Our last meeting was at the OpenJS Collaborators Summit, and we have minutes from that. And I don't know if it was recorded. I don't know if like that was something that I was supposed to do myself. I don't know, but I didn't do anything. So if somebody has a recording, maybe that would be cool to share, but not entirely necessary. Does anybody have any announcements of that they need to announce or feel that it is important that we talk about first? All right, so one thing that came up and was there's some talk about, if you look at issue 78, there's some criticism of the Rimder Recursive API. And so I think we need to take that into account when we're thinking about implementing these recursive APIs. And there's, in that issue 78, there's, I added some questions that I think we need to answer. Maybe there are more questions that we need to answer. And this may be a topic that is better suited to like a deep dive session than maybe one of these. Then again, if people feel like, yeah, if we want to spend time trying to hash this out now, we can. It's just kind of top of mind. I don't know. What do you think? It would be nice to like schedule that meeting, I think, later. So maybe more stakeholders or what have you would show up instead of just kind of going over it right now. Like maybe the FS group in Node and maybe somebody, people who open that issue. There's a reference to an issue in the Node repo about it. So what do you think? Do you want to spend much time on this one or just kind of go down the list?
Are you suggesting? Go ahead, Ben.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I don't know. I mean, it's good to have a discussion, but I don't really, like, we have had Rimder Recursive in for probably a year at this point. I don't quite understand why it's being relitigated.
It's still marked experimental. So, and I didn't even realize that it was marked experimental, but it is. And I don't think it's necessarily because it's full of bugs, though it may have bugs. It's that the API is not like, it doesn't do what some people would expect that it should do. I think or it's just like the quote was the API is clumsy, which I mean I can see issues with it. But then again, we came to the decision to do what we did because it's going to be very difficult to like, maybe all this stuff should go in a new module, but that's going to be hard to get done. So if not impossible, I think there's just like a
we tried that.
Yeah. So it's like, what can you do? If you can't do that, we want to do this, so we have to come to a compromise. And I think this was that compromise.
I think it's kind of relevant again now because we're talking about doing additional recursive file system work.
Mm-hmm.
So even if we, don't go back and change that, it would be nice to have some kind of pattern going forward that we could follow.
Yeah, and even if that pattern is, we no longer, there's no longer an expectation that these functions in FS are going to be like one-to-one to syscalls, which is apparently in the documentation. So
okay, maybe we should update the documentation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like I feel like I've had seen a lot of pushback on this recently on Twitter, I think, is what I've been reading. It was just this, like, there's this Node was built, and I do agree. I'm trying to like couch my comments, but like Node kind of like has this philosophy of tiny modules, but there's now this like dualistic kind of pushback that's happening, that people are trying to write these pure ESM modules, and now they realize they have a module tree of 200 things that they would need to move over to ESM before they can, you know, and they have to talk to people from 15 years of Node or 10 years of Node's history before they could update that entire module tree. So there's like this push and pull right now about keeping dependencies to a fairly small number of dependencies, which isn't necessarily in agreement with small modules, like a tiny module philosophy, with kind of the pushback we sometimes get on like extending any of the APIs in the core language itself to be more functional. So I don't know how to keep both, like keeping both camps happy can be a little difficult.
I'm not sure I understood exactly what. I mean, yes, there's the small core versus not small core, but
Yeah.
I guess I don't understand the bit about ESM and tiny modules.
You just make it.
I mean, it's impossible. It's impossible to move something that looks like a small dependency over to being pure ESM unless you update the entire module tree, right? So.
Right. I don't. What does that have to do with?
I've just seen FUD on Twitter about like, oh my God, I can't believe that this thing that was simple has 10 dependencies.
Yeah, I kind of tune that out. But
Like you're making an analogy there, Ben, right? Like to like increasing the scope of core.
I don't think I'm saying like, do we actually like does Node need to be a one-to-one mapping to Unix syscalls? I don't know if that's like fits the current world of JavaScript.
Well, I kind of made this comment on the ticket, but I think it's good if the by default it's kind of one-to-one, but I don't really see a problem with having a optional flag that can be specified that will make the function do more, which that's the case with the everything recursive we've done. You have to specify an extra option to get more than what POSIX APIs would give you.
mm-hmm.
At a fair point.
Oh, sorry, Ray.
No, I was just going to mention that I agree that it might be better to see the POSIX as a guideline rather than written in stone, and we can like not differ a little bit, right?
I mean, that's fine if we agree on that, but we're just us, right?
Yeah, we're not chartered, but like I feel like I like the philosophy of that. Like, I'm going to choose my own. Like, I'm going to choose Express versus Fastify versus Restify or whatever. That philosophy makes a ton of sense to me. But like, am I really going to bring? Oh, I have my own favorite recursive file remover. Like, that's not. Don't need options there. And what's happening as a community is we're seeing as we mature to be 10 years old or whatever. Like, a lot of these alternative options don't have that much support because someone built it 10 years ago on a completely different V8 than exists today. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that doesn't, to me, it's just confusing to the community to have too much choice in some of these core libraries. I'm a pretty strong advocate of some of these extensions like recursive. I'm trying to figure out how not to relitigate like rimraf.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sick of that argument.
I mean, I agree. I think, though, we should think about going forward, like what exactly that vision for these recursive APIs should be, given that this,
I think that's fair, and I'm not that opposed to being in a different module either. I think it's more about, like, I don't think it's an area of, I don't think it's an area that's foundational really benefits from the choice.
by choice, you mean what?
Like having 4 options for recursive directory removal, or like 4 options for recursive file creation or directory creation.
Mm-hmm.
So one comment that was made on the Node.js ticket was that if you do fs rmdir and give it a file name with the recursive flag, that'll actually delete the file. That actually sounds like a bug to me. Basically, the API should not be able to directly remove a file. It should be able to remove a directory that contains files. But like if I do fs.rmdir, /package.json, I mean, the documentation says that that's an error. Adding the recursive flag, I think, shouldn't change that.
I think what's kind of confusing, I agree with that, Corey. Well, I would say, like, what happens if I do that with, if we want to go to the Unix argument, what happens if I do rm-r and give it a file? Like, to me, like, there's a pretty good logical argument for recursive as a flag, which is that's how rm in like a Unix shell works.
Yeah, but it's rmdir is the thing.
Yeah, that's just it though. The rm is a CLI command, which you can do rm-file.js and it'll delete that. So adding the recursive to delete file doesn't really, I think, change anything. But if you drop down to the if you use the rmdir command, then I'd imagine that should fail. And if you use the the actual APIs, it'll definitely fail.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that definitely seems kind of wonky. It's meant to delete directories, but you can just give it a file and it acts like unlink, except it won't throw if it can't or the file doesn't exist.
That sounds like a bug, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, I don't know, we end up in this position where we're more, like, from a tooling perspective, like if I just want to delete whatever is being tossed in, like it's not that often that I would really care to differentiate that much. I can understand both arguments.
Yeah.
I'm guessing we ported over rimraf's behavior, right? I'm assuming that's how rimraf behaves in a file.
I don't know off the top of my head.
I think rimraf you can directly delete files, but I mean, I guess to me, we put this under the rmdir API, so that shouldn't remove direct file, in my opinion, anyway.
That's fair. It is annoying that it creates some extra work for someone though, like, because like, I mean, the main use case that, like, when I mentioned to people who do tooling at Google that there's these recursive functions trying to exist, I think that's the most excited thing. It's the most excited extension to the Node API, I think, that they have had on their radar in recent years, because this is the reason they pull in rimraf into every module they write, or mcderp into every module they write, because they don't have to. So you need some way to do that. So now they'd have to like, okay, our tooling will, no, I guess they'd probably always be, at least to know they're always deleting a directory. So I guess that constraint might bite them.
Here's a question. Sorry, Ben, go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just saying, if that was like what it took to get more buy-in, like it seems yeah, it seems reasonable to assume removed directory doesn't remove the file. Sorry, Brian.
So, I mean, one question I have here is we do have copy file on FS, right? Does it support recursive? I can't remember.
It doesn't, I believe, because we were talking about adding that as like a next step. But that does raise the question, like, do we add recursive to copy file? That copies directories now? Or do we add a copy dir function or a copy tree function?
Right, there's this whole, we have this history of a bunch of the commands mapping fairly directly to lower level either system calls or Unix commands, right? And a bunch of them that don't necessarily. Now, copy file does correspond to a low level call on most platforms, but not all platforms, if I'm not mistaken. So I think adding another top level function to FS to perform some functionality that could be replicated with other functions is totally within scope and totally within the history of Node, right? So for example, if we added another function named, let's say, RMR, so clearly, absolutely clearly referring to a recursive removal, maybe that would be like the approach of least impact, or at least of least controversy.
Yeah. I think people are using render recursive. Like it's, I don't, how loudly does it call out that it's experimental?
It's documentation only experimental. There's no runtime warning.
I'm just thinking like at this point that's moving cheese, unfortunately. Like it could be, like I was completely, like I would have been happy with us either approach, and we litigated it for a really long time and landed on it as a flag. But if we need to relitigate it to remove the experimental, then that's fine. But yeah, I have no strong opinion. I do think we'll break some people if we were to get rid of the flag, or get rid of the option.
Yeah, this has been on my mind as well, just because I think I volunteered to start looking into the recursive file copying. So as soon as I started thinking about it, I realized, where do I put this? But yeah, I'm definitely in favor of it being like a different, like copy dir or something. But I remember what happened with RimRaf, and I don't exactly want to do that again.
I'm pretty strongly opposed to breaking people at this point. Yes, it's experimental, but it's been there for quite a while. And, you know, Ben's right. There's probably quite a few people using it already. So
why don't we just come back with some numbers and say, like, let's, you know what, I think this is a fair point about it deleting a file. Like maybe we should think about the behavior around this. But look, we've run numbers on GitHub and we see this we've seen the recursive flag used on 40,000 GitHub repositories. Like let's find that number. I know how to, I know how to run that number.
So another comment just about, like, for example, creating a separate function. I think that might make sense for, you know, copy tree or copy directory, since that's kind of a different function than copying an individual file. Whereas rmdir recursive, you're basically just saying it's okay if there's stuff in this directory, just delete it and everything in it. Taking the rmdir and the mkdir and removing the recursive flag and creating separate functions. For each of those is 2 functions in FS and a function in fs.promises. So at a certain point, like if we're looking to do this for chmod, chown, how many functions are we going to get away with adding to the FS namespaces?
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also think, I mean, maybe this is kind of like, there's not one right answer. Like in the case of, you know, makedir recursive, that pretty obviously should just be a flag under makedir, I think.
And sorry to interrupt, Ian, but it's also not flagged as experimental any longer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in some cases, like, that makes sense. Whereas like adding recursive to copy file just because of the name maybe doesn't make sense, right? So maybe it's just like case by case. Maybe the recursive flag is kind of the default if it makes sense. And if not, we just make a new method.
I agree with that.
yeah, I agree with that too. I think it's going to be difficult to find a one size fits all
Yeah.
for all the.
I think it looks like we have experimental called out pretty loudly for Rimdir. We don't have experimental on Mictor, which isn't currently like, I mean, that's not, I don't think there's currently an issue litigating that anyway. So it's more like, how do we get RimRaf to make sure people are happy with it? So we can eventually remove the flag.
Yeah, and
So-
maybe that just means making it so you can't delete a file with it.
Yeah. So I've added two action items below this thing, which is one, we should probably open a PR to look at the deleting a file and with silent failure or success is probably not what it should be doing. That seems like a bug to me. It sounded like a bug to some others. And then we need to look and see, you know, how many people are actually using this experimental API as it stands. And
yeah,
if,
we did this. Oh, sorry, Chris.
Go ahead.
We did this for UID when I was doing it for TC39. So like, I think I have a query sitting around somewhere. I think there's a way to do it, like where we can like query all GitHub with BigQuery or something. So there's a way to.
Yeah, I mean, even a simple, well, no, GitHub search is probably not smart enough to do this correctly. But you know, okay. Well, do we want to move on from this one? Because yeah, that was 20 minutes.
So I just wanted to just add, as far as searching for users of the recursive RMDir, I'm using it on private projects, and I'm sure others are as well. And in the case of private projects, have no obligation to anybody to support older versions of Node. So basically, as soon as APIs are available and functional, I'll tend to use them. But obviously not the first concern, but it exists and really can't be counted.
I will just say where we maybe screwed up here, and we should screw up's the wrong thing. A learning experience here is we should have been loudly printing experimental to the terminal for RimRaf, because yeah, people, as long as you're not getting ugly warnings in your terminal, people are going to use it. So. Kind of experimental by docs doesn't really work.
Yeah, I actually didn't know it was experimental until today.
So, all right, Ben, I added you a little note in there in the doc. So yeah, IBM uses GitHub Enterprise. We have a lot of stuff in GitHub Enterprise, and so if you come up with some sort of query, I don't know if you're going to use. I don't know how you're going to do what you're going to do. If that's something that could be run on GitHub Enterprise, that would be cool to share.
Cool. Yeah, I'll look into it. I'll let you know.
Okay. All right. So let's move along. The next one then is 73 deep dive meeting proposals. And so there have been a couple comments here about some cool ideas. Maybe there haven't been. There has been one. It was Ben. So there's two. One of them would be this recursive RimDir stuff, or maybe extending that to just, I don't know. As Ian said, maybe there shouldn't really be a grand unified plan for how these APIs should look, and it should be done on a case-by-case basis. So it would be foolish to sit there for an hour and try to figure out some way to make them all the same. So maybe that's not great.
We could just turn that into a meeting though about like recursive file operations in general, like come up with some candidates that we maybe
Sure.
want to tackle, things like that.
Okay. And then the other one is then the ESM reloading stuff. Yeah, so those are both pretty, yeah. Does anybody have anything else they think might be a good deep dive? And if you do, you can just go into that issue, that's 73, and plop some ideas down in there. But maybe we should, I don't know, what do you think? Do we want to, let's try to schedule one of these if we can. Does that sound good? Is anybody interested in talking about this recursive stuff more at length, or the ESM reloading stuff more at length?
I think both would be really good topics, because like the ESM one might be good just because I feel like we keep running in circles around it. Like is the hooks to catch, are the, what are super mega hooks or whatever you call them, is that going to be the, I mean, we never need to do anything with ESM reloading and just super mega hooks can do it? Or like we keep, I feel like I'm blathering. Yes, let's talk about ESM reloading. It'd be a good topic.
Okay. And I don't think so. I think at this point, it's maybe somebody needs to open some sort of PR. Or no, I remember where we left off with this. We left off with, we need to go talk to the modules team.
Correct. Yeah.
So just to add some detail here, my understanding is that this is something that would have to happen in V8. My understanding of the situation is that it's not possible for Node.js to, on its own, create support for unloading modules, which I would imagine is required for reloading.
Right. So, yeah, Bradley explained that you're not going to be able to remove stuff. That's something that would need to happen at the V8 level, and that they're unlikely to give you that anyway. But what we can do is make it so we can load it again. You know, whatever. I'm not searching for the words, but it's like.
But isn't that kind of already supported by essentially using like a question mark random ID equals incremental number?
Yes, so there are hacks around it, but they're crappy hacks, and maybe we can do better than that.
That's what I was poorly trying to say, is that like it would be interesting to have a deep dive where we talk about those hacks and decide if we could protect people from it being too horrible. Like, we're basically saying we're going to give you a memory leak if you want to use something like proxy query. You can do it with a memory leak, right?
Right. I think that's going to be unavoidable unless V8 gives us a way to unload something. So.
And even if they do that, it's likely to be, versions away for Node.js to get that.
Right. So it sounds like, sorry.
I was just going to say, unless it's something that could be backported, but this kind of sounds like it would be possibly a bigger, deal.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think I like that idea about what are the hacks to reload some modules currently.
Yeah, I mean, like there's some really important, there's some foundational stuff in the community that's a huge hack, like Istanbul. Like I think as long as we kind of understand it's a hack and can pave the road for people, then it might be fine. Like, yeah, it's my 2 cents.
Yeah. So, okay. I will. Does any should we just use the same time? I think it's probably easier just to use the same meeting time for these, rather than make a new meeting and try to herd the cats.
Makes sense to me.
Okay.
I was gonna, one thing to worth add to it. I think that the argument parser stuff, moving that forward would be a good deep dive topic too.
I don't know. I feel like that's almost just, we just need to send a PR.
Okay.
I don't know. Why don't you put that in this issue and then we can discuss it on GitHub.
Action item taken. Yes.
So this one is okay. Chris should is usurp a good word here to use? I don't know. The meeting time, like a future meeting time for this. So I was thinking, which of these two would we rather do sooner? The ESM stuff or the recursive stuff? Because I was thinking maybe we could do one of these in the next month and then wait a month and do another one. And we don't have to do it that way. It's just.
Are either of them a more pressing issue?
Sounds like the recursive stuff to me right now, just because I would like to, I think we should make an effort to unflag rimraf, or like just so we don't end up with issues like this popping up again in the future.
Yeah, great.
I agree. Recursive is more pressing.
Okay. All right. Okay. Oh, what the hell? Okay. All right. Can we move on? What is this? Oh, okay. So I haven't looked at this one before. An attendee. I don't know how do you say your name mentioned this one. You commented here. I don't know the person who created this issue, but it is 71. So recommendation for config file location format. I mean, I don't think we can. One thing I can tell you would be silly is to try to come together of what a config file, the config file format should be. There's 50,000 ways to make a config file, and I don't think it's worth time spent like trying to think about it. But I do see here that like it would be helpful to recommend things, right? So one of the things here is this XDG base directory spec, which is cool if you're on Linux. I have no idea what that is on Windows. It's probably nothing. Probably has no meaning. You know, different systems want to put this type of thing in different places. And so is this, I don't know, is this cool to talk about? Do we want to, should we take it upon ourselves to try to say, well, if you're going to use a config file in your tool, maybe you should put it here. And if you can't put it there, put it somewhere else. Maybe if you need a cache, you should use this directory. Would it be helpful, you know, for the, I mean, yes, I think it would be helpful for the community to have some sort of guidance. I don't know, like how to provide that guidance, or if this we should be the people necessarily doing it. I don't know. What do you think?
I've seen the module working group do some stuff along these lines where they give kind of long form recommendations for, which was the one I was reading. I read a really good recommendation about, you know, it was adjacent to the module working group and a lot of people were involved, but I think it was in a separate org, but they had given a recommendation on what node version you should support and like long-term version support policies. It was a good read. I thought it was great. I like this idea.
Yeah, and I think that's my pet peeve, right? And it starts off at the very right thing, which is my pet peeve. The root directory of most node projects quickly becomes cluttered with tooling config files. And you have one folder lib where you put your code, and then you have a dump of various configurations. And I would very much love to see all of these configurations move off to a single folder. As for whether it's meant for this group, I haven't had a chance to raise it in any other group, but I spotted this on this group, and that's why I joined. And I think it's just as good if it happened in any other group. What it needs is it needs people who are maintaining these modules, standing behind that. And yeah, there's a suggestion of a module here. I don't know, I never used it, but just if one or more modules started, you know, looking in the .config folder, for example, before looking at the root folder, or even after looking at the root folder, then, you know, all the other groups can join in and It just needs an agreement that, it's a worthy goal of cleaning up the repository root level, as well as, all the other specifications that are possibly relevant there. So definitely agree that a format is probably unfeasible at any rate. I agree probably that even having a single, there's a suggestion here that, it's an option to explore, but having a single file which imports other configs from wherever and then exports those, and the tools that need that can require that file and use it. I think it would also be hard to gain traction for that, but having a folder for everybody to put their files in, I think that's very much doable. And it just needs enough people with enough clout to stand behind that.
Kind of, I think adjacent to this, like on my mind immediately when we talk about this topic, is the finicky logic of using a library like find up to detect the nearest config to wherever the heck you're trying to do something. And like Mocha has to implement that, Istanbul has to implement that, C8 implements that. So it's this finicky logic that's implemented 50 times over by people. And like does have these kind of baked in assumptions about where it finds those config files. So it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, I think all of us probably have been frustrated with just the sheer amount of crap that ends up in the root of our working copy, right? I'm sure half of us have probably written their own tool to try to do something about it. But okay, so a couple things in no order. One, Ultimate Megahooks could solve this because you could fake the file system, right? So when you go and you want to look for something in the root, well, maybe it's not actually there, but you could tell the phony file system to look in this other directory, and that would solve that. And so there's also then two different things. There's this community like recommendation. This is what you should do. You should put all your config files here instead of in the root, because that's really annoying. And then another part of it might be, okay, so we're going to implement this thing in Node that makes it easier to consume these configuration files. We're going to bless configuration files as a thing that Node recognizes as such. And maybe we're going to allow people to write custom loaders to load YAML files, TOML files, instead of just JS and JSON stuff, right? And so that goes out into all sorts of territories of various groups around Node, but what should we be focusing on? The package maintenance group is a really good group for these sorts of recommendations, and I think this is definitely something they'd be interested in. And there is certainly an opportunity to bake something into Node that would really make this a lot nicer to deal with. Just like some of the assumptions that, like the conventions that tools like Cargo and Rust adopt, right? Like those are super handy. I don't know if you tried it, but like working with Rust, but like you use Cargo and then there's all these conventions and you just put the files where they go, and it's neat and it works, and it keeps everything very tidy. So yeah, it's I don't know, I think that would be a really fun one to look at further, and maybe even this is something that we might want to spend more time on, just kind of maybe brainstorming, and there's certainly tons of things that we could do. Which of them that we actually should be doing, and like what do we want to spend our limited time on?
Could start as just a good blog post from someone in the group, kind of pull together some thoughts.
I agree in a way that package maintenance group is philosophically and from the perspective of what purpose this serves is is probably a better fit for this and for advocating and all of that. However, it does need like, would a good starting point be at least, and I'm sure some of you also maintain some tools, would a good starting point would be to start some issues, to start using that folder in the tooling that we know that could potentially use that? Just start putting stuff in the, not putting stuff, reading stuff from that folder, start updating that and see if that picks up. As opposed to doing something and something official and something that, you know, here's a group, here's a committee, we decided.
Well, if we all just go and say, hey, let's read from the .foo folder, like, don't we need to kind of decide first before we start doing that?
Yeah, it's like chicken or the egg. I mean, I was thinking to myself, I
already decided. Yeah, I already decided. It's not config.
I like having my config under version control. So the thing that immediately jumped out at me is, why the heck don't I have like a .config folder in my repository or something that I shove all those things in? And then as long as, like, because I mean, yards is used by a lot of people and it has opinion. It uses, yards has find up built into it. Why doesn't find up look in a config folder? I don't have to, when I can shove all my stuff in a config folder, that'd be great. I don't know, it's a good idea. Like, just out of sight, out of mind. So.
But that would make find up, that would just like break find up, right?
No, I did a patch for find up, so you can actually use find up. For example, you could do .config/mocha rc.js, and it'll actually look for the file in the subdirectory of every directory up.
Yeah, that's tricky.
That won't break.
Okay, well, that's good.
I like this idea because, oh my goodness, I have like 25 RC files in my work libraries, and it's ridiculous.
I was just like, you know what? I'm going to commit all these files into config, and then I'm going to run a post install script that symlinks them all back into the root directory.
So, so my comments on this, like, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to making this possible in NYC, for example, but I'd want to kind of get a bunch of tool maintainers together. You know, obviously we have Mocha here, but, you know, just roll up Webpack and basically say, hey, are you willing to make it so that this file will be found by default? And I'd like to see a critical mass, you know, before I essentially make it so NYC is stuck with that forever. You know, because with major tools, once you add a feature like that, it's really hard to remove.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it would be, yes, it would be worthwhile to at least like go into, like, find the top 20 tools or whatever, go into each repo, open an issue and say, hey, we want to try to do a thing because this is a problem.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I agree with Corey's. Like, I think it's something worth talking about more, though, because that would be nice to clean up that folder. Slightly different than the XCG based, or like, I think I'm talking about like RC files in a repository, not so much about like, I don't know, a credentials file that's found at the system level. Like, just a slightly different problem. But
yeah,
I agree. The config files in the project root are the big thing for me.
Project specific config.
Yeah.
Not user specific.
I posted that link to a tweet that I posted like a year ago, and in that particular project, that list has only grown. I think there's like 40 files in the root of that one. Like, it's just totally out of control.
So there's a question worth asking, and that is it worth going through this effort if we can't get enough of a critical mass behind this? Because I'm worried about things like various CI tools and maybe things that have not as much necessarily a thing to do with Node.js. They're just part of our build life, right? Or our tooling life. And, you know, trying to agree as a Node community to go through this kind of effort might be one thing, but it would have to be much bigger in order to actually deal with the problem in any sort of completion. I'm really thinking about like CI tools here. Like, I can't imagine Circle CI changing where they look for files. So maybe they would, but
Circle CI is already a folder, so it's slightly less of it.
Sure,
I mean,
sure. Maybe not the best example, but you know.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, Brian. Yes, it's not just our little ecosystem, our big ecosystem that would have to do this, but it doesn't mean I don't think it would mean it's not worthwhile to do if JavaScript community is the only one who adopts this. But also, we've led the way on other things before. Like we led the way, maybe even, I don't know, semantic versioning is a virus now because it's all over the place.
I was going to make that point. Like, I think like I've seen these kind of grassroots things work really well, like coverage. Like not that many people in the Node community did coverage until NYC was out and just made it so easy. People started doing it. It's like, and I've seen this happen a few times. NPM was viral. Like NPM, Isaac just started putting package.jsons in a ton of projects. So I don't know, it's a really good idea. I don't know why I put up with so many configs in my darn root folder. I'm now angry about it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, even if it took a long time to adopt this, or we, like even if I could move 25% of those files, you know, and just slowly over time be able to move more and more of them out of there, that would be great. Anything has got to be better than the situation now.
Yeah. Brian has a really fair point, though.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, you don't want the fragmentation necessarily. It's annoying now, like, oh, I have to look in 2 places for these things, but
I think if we were smart and didn't call it like .node config or something, like just called it something that's hard to argue with, like .config or something.
Right.
And then like, I think if suddenly the thousands of JavaScript libraries had adopted this, I think you'd start to see people go, oh yeah, maybe I should support a .config that moves the stuff into a semantically logical folder. It kind of makes sense.
So I quickly note that I've been mulling over a npm rc.json file as an RFC. So an expansion on npm rc files, which actually would potentially allow us to clean up config for npm in npm's world. I'm not sure if we could expand on that to also have you identify your config folder in that for node world land, but it's yeah, this is, I don't know if you can ever solve this unless you're gonna like symlink everything back.
We didn't cover that many topics in this week's meeting, funny enough. I've gotten very excited about this one. I'm easy to derail this week, but this is, to me, this is a great topic of conversation. I don't know, to me, honestly, it sounds like probably getting that momentum, like Corey suggests, with package maintainers would make sense, but a bunch of them are in this meeting, so this is a great place to bring that up.
Yeah, so part of the point of me bringing that up is, so for example, to me, .config makes sense, but maybe the author of Rollup, says, hey, that doesn't make sense because of this. And I like, for example, for NYC to support loading the config from a subdirectory, I'd like to get it right the first time.
Would you be okay with one config file to rule them all, like a .npm rc.json file that would actually point to your config folder?
No. Oh, I don't know. Because then at that point I have to load.
Or your package JSON?
I don't think it should be. It should be able to be used by other ecosystems if they want.
Yeah, my preference is that there shouldn't be config to find the config. Just kind of my
good caveat.
I think there's still value in consolidating config at npm's level, but I think exactly to Corey's point, like if we pick something really logical, then I think you'd start to see it be a little viral on GitHub, and suddenly the Go community would be doing it, and the Ruby community would be doing it.
But if it's super logical, it's probably being used already by some folks, which might be a great game.
And why do we have so many files in the root folder?
Well, I guess 2 things there. One, it might be good to see if there is any kind of convention for this in any other ecosystems. And And while I personally really like .config, I guarantee there's some like framework or something out there that like that's where they store their config, and that's gonna break for them or whatever. But
Yeah, what's an action item? Let's do some research and come back to talk about it more.
my
We can also
research
ask
is going to
Doug.
consist of tweeting this question and seeing what happens.
.config is used by Linux already at your home folder, so that's pretty broad.
That's also potentially confusing, right? If you start telling people to put something in their .config folder and they're on Linux, then we might run into some ambiguity.
Yes, I did raise that in my comment a little bit, especially if you also do a find up type thing where it goes up several levels, and then for somebody who's a package maintainer and there's a user saying, it's reading the wrong config file, or you have a hope. Yes, there is that.
So, yeah, we're all very excited about this, but we need some sort of next step. What should we be doing next?
I'd be curious to have someone research this more. Like it seems like something where maybe it is just a matter of people saying, hey, shoot, we do have 10 things in our top level folder. Like maybe we should just have a different convention for that. I think it's a great conversation. I don't know, who wants to do some of the research? It sounds like you've been bitten by it really hard, Ian, and I'm going to pronounce the name wrong, but is it Domini or Dominicus?
It's Dominicus, but just call me Dom.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you've already done research on this topic, so maybe we can summarize some of that with Ian. Do that tweet, Ian.
Yeah, sure. Let's see much reaction to that.
Should we open up a separate issue for this? Because if we link to the existing issue, it's pretty broad in scope.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it tries.
Yes, new issue.
Okay, if we get a new issue out, maybe me or some of us could tweet something out and point to that issue and see what kind of feedback we get.
Okay. Who uses .project?
Isn't that like IntelliJ or something?
That's .idea.
Oh, right.
I think it's Eclipse.
Okay. Okay.
You know if that's a file or a directory?
I'm pretty sure that's a directory created by Eclipse.
Okay, so theoretically, Eclipse using it wouldn't stop us from also using it.
Darcy, was your question answered? The scope of the problem is beyond node packages?
Not really. Like,
So,
what are we solving for here? Like, that's
think-
kind of like if we're trying to solve for your entire project that could have, I don't know.
I mean, I think we need to focus on what JavaScript needs, but do it in a way that it could be used by others. Just like, don't make it so like Node or JavaScript specific that it can't be used by somebody else. That's just how I see it, though.
Good thing to bike shed more, but I think it's a valuable topic. We're getting close to time.
Yeah, we gotta.
I just want to be mindful. I think the other really important action item from this meeting is we should kind of figure out how to get the rimwrap over the finish line too. Like, does anyone want to own that action item?
Oh, you mean to make it so you can't delete a file with it?
You just join that conversation. Someone should join that conversation and see if that would get consensus. Maybe like own kind of getting us to unflag that feature.
Yeah, I've commented on that issue already. I can maybe propose that.
I think that'd be worthwhile if you want to even own like literally just making a pull request to. You could even make a straw person pull request to remove the feature, like to remove the experimental flag. I think that would be worth doing.
Just removing the flag?
No. Maybe it could be like maybe have the conversation, and then if
Right,
people
like
are
do-
open to that, we fix the bug and remove the flag or something.
Gotcha. Yeah. I'll post a comment right now just saying like, hey, that does sound like a bug. We're thinking about fixing that. Would that, you know, satisfy people?
And then oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was gonna take the one that makes a new issue out of this 71, the config file stuff. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we can all join the conversation there. It sounds like a lot of us are excited about it.
All right, so yeah, we gotta wrap it up. Okay, so awesome. We got to what we got to, and that's fine with me. So there's some things here that need to be done, and we will do them when we do them. So have a good weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Right.